Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Tonight, we're talking about a moment that many believed would never happen. A moment that has shaken the foundations of power in Russia and sent shockwaves across the world. Moscow in flames. Putin's biggest symbol of power wiped out. For years, the Kremlin projected an image of absolute control. Strength, stability, untouchable authority. The message was simple and relentless. Russia is strong, Moscow is secure, and Vladimir Putin is in full command. But history has a cruel habit of exposing illusions, and today, that illusion is burning. What you are witnessing is not just fire and destruction. This is not just another headline or breaking news alert. This is a psychological earthquake, a symbolic collapse. A moment that rewrites how the world views Russia's power, and how Russians themselves see the man who promised them security above all else. Moscow has always been more than a city. It is the heart of the Russian state, the nerve center of political authority, military planning, intelligence operations, and national pride. For centuries, Moscow has stood as a fortress of identity and power. From the days of the Tsars to the Soviet Union, and now under Vladimir Putin, Moscow has represented continuity, control, and dominance. That is why flames in Moscow carry a meaning far beyond physical damage. When fire touches the symbols of power, it ignites fear, doubt, and anger, and that fear is not limited to ordinary citizens. It reaches the highest offices, the deepest bunkers, and the most guarded rooms of the Kremlin. For Vladimir Putin, power has always been built on perception, the perception that he is strong, that he is always in control, that Russia, under his leadership, is immune to humiliation. But the images emerging from Moscow tell a different story. A story of vulnerability, a story of failure, a story of a leader whose promise of safety has been broken in the most visible way possible. For years, the Kremlin assured its people that war would never reach Moscow. Conflicts could happen elsewhere, borders could burn, distant regions could suffer, but Moscow would remain untouchable, protected by layers of air defense, intelligence networks, and military might. That belief has now been shattered. The flames rising in Moscow are not just destroying buildings, they are destroying confidence. Confidence in the military, confidence in intelligence agencies, confidence in leadership. When the capital of a nuclear-armed superpower is exposed, the psychological damage is immense. This moment did not come out of nowhere. It is the result of years of decisions, miscalculations, and overconfidence. Vladimir Putin built his rule on the idea that Russia had returned as a global power, that the chaos of the 1990s was over, that the West could be challenged, pressured, and intimidated, that Russia's enemies would think twice before crossing red lines. But power, when built on fear alone, is fragile, and now that fragility is visible for all to see. Inside Russia, the mood is shifting. State media may try to control the narrative, but people are not blind. Social media, private conversations, whispered fears, these cannot be fully silenced. Russians are asking questions they once dared not ask. How could this happen? Who failed? And most dangerously for the Kremlin, is Putin still capable of protecting the country? Authoritarian systems survive by projecting inevitability, the sense that resistance is pointless, that the leader is permanent, that the system cannot be shaken. But when flames rise in the capital, inevitability disappears. What replaces it is uncertainty, and uncertainty is deadly for regimes built on control. For Putin, this is not just a security failure, it is a personal humiliation. He has carefully crafted his image for decades. The strongman, the strategist, the protector of the Russian state. Images of Moscow burning directly attack that image. They undermine the myth that Putin is infallible, and myths matter. Dictators do not rule by force alone. They rule by belief, belief that they are powerful, belief that they are necessary, belief that without them, chaos would follow. When belief cracks, the entire system trembles. Internationally, the message is just as powerful. Allies are watching closely. Rivals are reassessing. Neutral countries are reconsidering their positions. The idea that Russia can guarantee absolute security, even within its own capital, is now in doubt. This changes calculations everywhere. From Europe to Asia, from military planners to political leaders, everyone is reevaluating what Russia can and cannot do. And when a country's perceived strength declines, its influence follows. But perhaps the most important impact is psychological. For years, Russians were told that sacrifices were necessary for greatness, that economic hardship, isolation, and repression were the price of national pride, that suffering was justified because Russia was strong again. Now, as Moscow burns, that narrative collapses. People begin to wonder, what was it all for? This moment also exposes the cost of centralized power. When decision-making is concentrated in the hands of one man, mistakes become systemic. Failures cannot be corrected because no one dares to challenge the leader. Warnings are ignored, reality is filtered, truth becomes dangerous. Over time, this creates a leadership trapped in its own propaganda. A leader who believes his own myth. A system that mistakes silence for loyalty and fear for stability. And when reality breaks through, it does so violently. Moscow in flames is reality breaking through. For the security elites surrounding Putin, this is a nightmare scenario. Their legitimacy depends on competence. Their privileges depend on loyalty. Their survival depends on Putin's continued grip on power. But when the leader appears weak, loyalty becomes fragile. History shows us that regimes rarely collapse from external pressure alone. They collapse when internal confidence erodes, when elites begin to doubt, when fear turns inward, when the cost of loyalty becomes higher than the risk of change. No one is openly challenging Putin yet, not publicly, but behind closed doors, calculations are being made. Careers are being reassessed, blame is being quietly assigned, and in authoritarian systems, blame is dangerous. Someone will pay for this failure, that much is certain, and that search for scapegoats creates paranoia. Paranoia leads to purges. Purges weaken institutions, and weakened institutions accelerate decline. This is how power begins to eat itself. For ordinary Russians, the future feels more uncertain than ever. Economic pressure is already intense. Sanctions bite, inflation rises, opportunities shrink. Now, even the promise of safety feels hollow. When the capital is not safe, where is? Fear spreads quickly. Not just fear of external enemies, but fear of instability. Fear of collapse. Fear of what comes next. And when people are afraid, they start looking for alternatives, new leaders, new ideas, new futures. The Kremlin understands this danger. That is why the response will be swift and harsh, more censorship, more arrests, more propaganda, more attempts to control the narrative. But control has limits. Fire cannot be unseen. Every image, every video, every rumor undermines the story of total control. And once that story is broken, it cannot be fully repaired. For Putin, this may mark the beginning of the most dangerous phase of his rule, not because he is about to fall tomorrow, but because the foundation beneath him is cracking. Strongmen survive crises by projecting strength, but when the crisis itself exposes weakness, the path forward narrows. The world has seen this pattern before. Leaders who stay too long, systems that refuse to adapt, power that becomes brittle. Collapse does not come all at once. It comes in moments like this. Moscow in Flames will be remembered as one of those moments. It will be remembered as the day the illusion of invulnerability was destroyed, the day Russians saw that even the heart of their power could be touched, the day Putin's promise of absolute security was broken. What happens next is uncertain, and uncertainty is exactly what authoritarian leaders fear most. Because once people realize that power is not absolute, anything becomes possible. This is not just a story about fire. This is a story about fear, pride, and the slow unraveling of an image that once seemed unbreakable. It is about a leader facing the consequences of his own myth, and it is about a nation standing at the edge of a future it did not expect. Moscow burned, and with it, something far more important was lost: Putin's illusion of control. If you found this analysis valuable, make sure to stay with us for more deep breakdowns of the stories shaping our world right now. The situation is evolving, and what comes next may change everything. Thank you for watching. Stay informed, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next video.